Welcome back to Martins and More. My name's Maury Rutch, and this is the conclusion of Luxe by Martin Kovar Strings. This episode's brought to you by our Patreon members. Join our growing community for early access to every episode, exclusive video content, behind-the-scenes footage, full-length product demos, and so much more. We appreciate you. What do these new strings sound like on Maury's guitar? What do Maury and Spoon think of these strings? All of that and more coming up. We now join our program already in progress. My idea of a good acoustic sound, if I'm not being proactive about it, doesn't have a lot of mid-range information. It's just really warm. And I've watched some old videos of friends of ours in the audience that would show us on Facebook, and my guitar sort of goes away. So if I'm thinking about it, I will add a little bit of definition with an EQ. And I literally mean just right around 1K or 2K. And I just take the control from 0 to 1. I don't go crazy. When I first played my OM28V that I was talking to you guys about a few minutes ago at my first gig, it was a solo gig, and all the impressions I gave you was from that point of view. The next week, or maybe 10 days later, I played the second gig, but it was with Tim, and I recognized these retro strings did all of that for me. All of the caution I have to normally take when I'm playing phosphor bronze strings to be careful with my EQ, I could be careless with EQ because these strings gave that upper mid-range push, and I loved it. I felt like I could play a little bit lighter, and everything I was doing with my right hand, I got more mileage out of it. I didn't have to struggle nearly as much or at all to be heard clearly in a 2 acoustic guitar loud mix. So the thing, I don't want to go too far and talk about the second test yet, but playing with another guitar player in the mix, and I can't really say that we did anything where I compared my guitar to his unamplified. We don't do that sitting at a gig before we plug in. We don't just sit there and play. I should have done that too, but I do recognize that this gave me a benefit, and I'll save some more details till the end of the podcast, but that was a very big benefit and a plus that I don't typically hear in phosphor bronze, and I'm probably sure I don't hear them in retros. So
that's great. That's great information. And yeah, so we're seeing a pattern here, at least right now, about that extra definition, and whether it's not really a volume thing, it's a perception thing. You can make it out. You can hear it clearly.
Yes.
And it's not getting swallowed by the rosewood undertone that's coming up into the mids and washing like a shoreline getting washed by the ocean that keeps moving in. And I love that about Martin guitars, that the particularly traditional Martin guitars with the full size dovetail neck joint, where you get that bassy low mid undertone that goes up into and mixes organically with the mid-range and treble, but you're not losing that mid-range definition, the true mid-range, what you call the higher mid-range definition from that. And I think that's fascinating. And I can only guess this was a unlooked for benefit of these strings. They weren't sitting there developing these strings to accomplish that. They were trying to develop strings that sounded like traditional guitar strings, but had corrosion resistance naturally built into the metal that they're using. So I think that's fascinating. That's why I'm now curious to go out and start doing research and see what other people say about them and see if other people mention this sort of phenomenon. But so you were saying you were playing electrically at like 10 days. What about acoustically? Did you notice much change from when they're brand new to after you had them on for a week or two?
Honestly, not a lot, but if anything happened from day 1 to day 14, I think some of the shimmer and that zing that happens with a brand new set of strings kind of came down to an acceptable level from an exaggerated level. And I don't ever mind if a brand new set of strings has that really almost piercing or strident, like super top end that's just a little bit too much. I probably don't hear that much anymore because of my age and my playing loud music, and my ears aren't what they used to be. But more importantly, I recognize anything that's that high in the frequency spectrum is going to get either lost or you're going to want that. So it's sort of like the very uppermost part of an equalizer. If it's boosted a bit too much, once you get into a loud room, I think that's the first thing that's going to basically go away and not be in anybody's way. So I didn't recognize any serious deficiency from the first test and then playing it at home a little bit and in the store. I did play it acoustically a few times between the first gig and the second gig. I didn't spend any of that time plugging into it in amp here at the store and listening for any changes electrically, but I did still like the sound past that first gig, and I was very careful when I came home. The day after I played the first gig, I did open the case and try to get a good impression of it after the honeymoon stage was over, and I did like it a lot. But before I get too far and talk too much about the month, or I should say that the second week, and after that first period goes away, can I ask you, Spoon, or should I go first? What do you think about the feel?
Well, that's interesting. I'm going to comment a little bit about what you said about, you refer to the new string zing, as I call it, that I hear in phosphor bronze strings and the 8020s differently. But what I don't get in the phosphor bronze typically is what I call that sonic glare, that real vibrantness. And also, phosphor bronze strings, and another reason I'm not a big fan of phosphor bronze is I'm completely self-taught. I wasn't taught with a lot of great technique. You get a lot more string noise out of them. That wick, wick, wick string noise, which is perfectly fine. We all like hearing it on albums when, artists are here and there. I don't like hearing it, to the point that it's starting to grating on my ears, which often happens with phosphor bronze strings, and particularly new phosphor bronze strings, and somebody who never takes their fingers off the strings. And these are supposed to be sounding like phosphor bronze strings, but they don't do that. They have a lot less string noise. Maybe not as less string noise as the T strings that you were playing. Maybe, certainly not as much as the coated strings that other brands make. And I noticed that when Martin changed from their original treated string or coated string or whatever it was to the modern extended lifespan strings, they gained a little more of that kind of string noise and that feel where you can feel the grooves and the wound strings. These strings, I think, may have even a little more string noise than that, but not nearly as much as new phosphor bronze strings. They don't have the sonic glare of the new phosphor bronze strings, so in some respects they sound like, to my ear, like phosphor bronze strings that have been played in a little while, almost the way that they say Monel sound like new strings have been played in a little while, and but still with all that amazing definition. And I like how they feel. I like the fact that and again, because I wasn't able to play for a while, my calluses got soft, and so I get some pain when I play for too long, and they don't tend to hurt my fingers as much. And I don't know how much of that is me starting to play more, but yeah, I enjoyed the feel of them. I don't play a lot of the kind of rock and roll big bend, string bend stuff that you do, so I really can't comment that much. I feel like they have less string tension than the strings that I normally use, and I'm not a big fan of waggly strings. I like to have string tension because I play really hard. So that may have entered into, I won't call it negatives when it comes to pros and cons. I feel like they're easy to move around and some, up and down, that kind of stuff. And I feel like some people really like that, where I feel like I have to be a little more disciplined in my playing to not waggle them around too much.
Yeah, I can't say that I really do a lot of bends, and when I say that, I'm comparing myself to my bandmate Tim Perry. He'll do bends, the whole time. What I really did recognize when I played them, just playing chords anywhere on the neck, it just felt like almost as if you take a regular set of phosphor bronze and detune it by a half step, and that's just my off-the-cuff idea to say now. I didn't really compare them, but it doesn't feel like silk strings or silk wrapped, and it doesn't feel like nylon strings, don't get me wrong, but there's a noticeable difference, in my opinion, to how much less tension is going on, even just when you're holding down chords. And I recognize that more going away from them back to the Foster Bronze, I thought, I really like those strings now that they're not on. And I don't necessarily have a hard time playing 12s, and I do play a lot of guitar consistently. So my calluses are still healthy, but I recognize, I kind of recognize when I played the Kovars, and I definitely recognize when I stopped playing Kovars. Kovars are easier to play, and I'll go on record saying that. That's probably what I miss the most about them. And if I go back to try them more than 2 or 3 times, which I will, I think that's what I'm going to come away from. Really, they feel easy, if that makes sense.
Well, yes, and like I said, I didn't want to make it sound negative, and yet at the same time, it felt kind of negative for me because when I put them on my rosewood guitar, which is short scale, definitely noticed it, and because of the less string tension, inherent to a short scale guitar. And they have the superior performance cores, and I'm not sure if that's Martin's term for their lower tension core, but I suspect it is because these feel like their lower tension core strings. And that's a very popular thing these days, and it has been for more than a decade that people like that. They know a lot of modern acoustic guitar players are playing rock and roll or blues or modern blues on their strings, and they want to be able to do Mark Knopfler bends and Pink Floyd bends, for that matter, David Gilmour bends, and you just can't really do that on an acoustic guitar with typical acoustic guitar strings. So lower tension strings, make that easier. And like you said, it hasn't occurred to me for somebody who hasn't played for a long time. And maybe do not have the athletic stamina that you have to play, that easier to play strings may in fact mean they can play longer without fatigue, and that could very easily be seen as a selling point. I like the way they literally feel when you slide your fingers over them. They're not as greased feeling that you got on the old Elixirs where they have no tension whatsoever and you have no string noise at all, and you feel like you're playing nylon. You don't feel like you're even playing steel strings. These still feel like metal, but I just feel like they were easier. I really like the fact that I can slide around on the strings more, either doing, sounded glides or just sliding up to get to places without voicing the string, and, effortlessly and with a lot less string noise. And I enjoy that very much about it. And I think that's a major plus for me, for somebody. So I would say, if I was doing a quick soundbite about these, I would say that I think they do sound like Foster Bronze strings without all the things that I don't like about Foster Bronze strings. All the stuff I don't like about Foster Bronze strings is kind of EQ'd down or removed altogether, and that's mainly the raspy string noise and that almost sonic glare that makes me my ears kind of go with brand new Foster Bronze strings. And wow. And so when Tim first told me, the way you think they sound like Foster Bronze strings, I honestly was to say they could sound like they were made out of goose down, and he would probably say that because he knows people like Foster Bronze strings, and that he was psychologically trying to say these sound like Foster Bronze strings, but they don't. And at the same time, but it's actually true. So my apologies for assuming Tim was basically trying to do a shell game with how he described the strings. I think they do sound more like Foster Bronze strings than they sound like 80-20s. So they sound more like Foster Bronze strings than they do the retros. They describe them as sounding clear and natural. Now, what about that? Would you say that's accurate? Or is that also just psychological? This is what we think people want, so we're going to say they sound that way.
Well, now you have me wondering, have you tried the goose down strings yet? Because that sounds like something I wouldn't like.
Not at all. Especially if you have allergies. Gosh.
Yeah. I wouldn't, to answer your question about natural, I don't like that term. This is somebody who considers Foster Bronze to be natural and 80-20s to be even more so. So I think, no, I would say, and what I mean is I'm coming from my guitar naturally sounds a certain way ever since I've been playing it forever. And that's the word natural would fly in the face of something brand new can't be natural because it's different. I would call these hi-fi. I would call them sharp. I would call them detailed. I think if you recorded another CD, which you should do, by the way, and you found that your sound wasn't cutting through enough and there wasn't enough definition, you would do some EQ tricks to bring it more, make it become more detailed. I think this makes my guitar sound more detailed than the other strings I'm used to, whether it's trying 80/20s once in a great while, the phosphor bronze I love. I think the Kovars have more detail. If that ends up being natural in Martin's eyes, I don't pretend to know which. They have so much R&D into this. Maybe that is the right term, but I think an acoustic guitar naturally sounds acoustic, and I think Kovar makes an acoustic guitar have more detail than what's naturally there from what I'm used to. So I don't know if that answer really...
That's interesting. Yeah, I totally agree. I think they have great high definition to them, and I would love to try recording with them and see what I think. And I think natural is, marketing speak-wise, natural is not a bad choice of words because they don't sound like coated strings. I think for people who are used to traditional strings, coated strings sound muffled. Even though, like I said, there's plenty of artists out there who record with them. I'm trying to remember who it is. I'm going to say it's Woody Mann, the late Woody Mann. I don't remember. I just remember who it was when I asked him about it. I was really surprised. He said he played elixirs, and he said he needed to because touring and all that stuff. And they lasted forever. And I was surprised because I was at a show. It was a small place, so you were hearing the acoustic guitar as well as hearing it amplified. And I would have never guessed that they were coated strings. So I think either our prejudices or when you know coated strings are coated, you go looking for the coated string sound. And, and I didn't really hear it. It didn't stand out to me. I never knew that, and I would have bet money they weren't using elixirs, but they were. I didn't ask them which ones. Whether there's nano webs and they have a whole bunch of different ones.
Well, so El McMean still swears by them.
Yeah, there's a very good example. And maybe for people. We won't mention any names, Tim Perry, but some people's perspiration is just naturally, body chemistry just naturally wears strings out. It's not just the fact that he plays like a wild man. His natural body chemistry kills strings. And so he's somebody that benefits from anti-corrosion strings. Let's move on to the longevity aspect of it and the fact that these cost $20. So to cost $20, my strings from Martin at their same price point, at the same level playing field, cost $8 or maybe even $9. $8 and something for the silk marquee silk. So these are less. These are just a little more than twice as much. I think the regular Martin strings you get closer to talking about 3 times as much. Do these strings last 3 times as long as the regular phosphor bronze, the basic phosphor bronze string that Martin makes? Do you think?
Short answer is no, and I want to put an asterisk there. I should have looked at the website before we started this. I might even take a pause to do that. I just connected my friend Sean with some strings, and I think he bought a set of the Martin Authentic Acoustic, not the MA540Ts that I play, but something very similar. I thought they were closer to $14. So
$14? No kidding.
Let me be honest. Since we have the opportunity, I'm going to put a beep here, and I really want to see if I'm not right about that. I'm finding like a set of 80/20 custom lights are $750. I found some strings from Martin that range between $6 and $8 if they're not treated. If they're not the T.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah.
Yeah. So the strings I play are MA540Ts. They're $15 a set. The strings you're talking about, I didn't find that specific pack, but you can look at a set of 80/20 bronze lights, the M140s. They're not treated. they're just called original acoustic strings. They're $6. So
yeah, so I think the Marquis silks are about $3 more than the non-silked ones. The treated strings that you play are more expensive because they're treated, but they're also, again, they last longer, so you're not spending as much money. And I mentioned this to someone, a friend of mine here who owns Martins, but he's a primary classical guitar player. And he said that, think about who plays acoustic guitars and not professionals or even regular gigging musicians. Most people don't play all that often, and they probably don't change their strings very often at all. And so to have a string, and there are probably people that go 3 or 4 months and just play strings that are just dead on a doornail. And this gives them an opportunity, even though they're costing more, they're keeping the tone longer, and the tone stays longer, so they still remain economical, even though they maybe were paying $7 to go 4 months or 3 months, but they're paying $7 to go 3 or 4 months of what's primarily dead strings. And these longevity strings, still may be worth it to people to if they do last, if they really are going to last that long. So you did have them on for a month. So what do you have to say about that?
Hold that thought before we talk about what they sound like after a month. And even before we talk about what they sound like after 2 weeks, why don't we see what they sound like after 2 weeks by listening to it? Let's pause for a moment and listen to a sound sample of the Kovar strings after 2 weeks. Take that.
Indeed, impressive. Also, before we move on to your impressions after a month, we've been mentioning 80-20 strings. How do you feel up for a game of 80 questions or 20 questions?
You finally got ahead of me with that joke. I would love to do that.
Excellent. I think we'll stick with the 20 questions because this is already going to be a long episode talking about these new strings. So 20 questions. This is the game that we like to play where one of us picks a Martin guitar that is available for sale today, and the other one has to guess what it was. They get up to 3 guesses of what model it might be, but they count toward those 20 overall questions. And this week, the smart guy, being Maury, gets to pick a model, and the wise guy, being yours truly, has to try to figure out what model it might be. And our learned colleague, Mr. Maury, was sweating bullets last time, so I think he is, in fact, he one of the few times I actually stumped him. And we'll see if he's going to come up with a hard one for me today, or he's going to pitch me a softball. We'll find out.
It's not going to be a softball. Okay. I'm thinking of a Martin guitar, and 20 questions on the clock, and Go.
Is this guitar a full-size guitar?
No.
Is this guitar in the Junior series?
Yes. Can I pick a different one? Can you see my... Is it reflected in my glasses?
Sorry, just the look on your face.
I'm still so mad at you from last week. Now I'm more because I think I don't have the upper hand anymore, but continue.
Does this guitar have 6 strings?
Yes.
Does this guitar have a cutaway?
No. 5 questions.
Is this guitar a D Junior?
No.
Is this guitar a triple O Junior?
Yes.
Does this guitar have a spruce top?
Yes.
Is this guitar a triple O? Oh, wow, I can't remember what they're called. Triple O Junior. No. Triple O E Junior?
No. 9 questions.
Am I not going to get this because I can't remember the exact model name?
Well, I'm your friend more than I'm upset last week. You just asked me, is this a triple OE Junior? That's not the entire name. I've got to say that much. You've got some of the name there.
Okay.
I can't lead you down a bad rabbit hole. You haven't fully given me the name.
I've got to go into my mind palace like Sherlock and...
Why don't you go on the computer like Dickinson did? Until we caught him.
Oh, now I'm going to run into what you ran into last time. I may have to give up because I'm drawing a blank of what this could be. So it's a 6-string guitar in the Junior series. It's a triple O. It's got the, Does this guitar have onboard electronics?
Yes.
Okay, so it is an E.
If you're watching this on the YouTube version in real time, do you know?
Yeah, I'm curious to see who knew. I'm going to have to start studying now that we're trying to get obscure models on each other. This isn't a Street Master model, is it?
No, that's 11 questions.
Oh, man. What is it?
I hope they do still make this.
About my brain.
And if you remember last week, this is where a spoon forgot to keep counting. At least I'm counting.
I've the name's the thing wherein you'll catch the conscience of my aggravation. I am going to have to forfeit. So this will be the second week in a row that somebody forfeited because I cannot think beyond that it's a triple O, non-cutaway, in the Junior series with a spruce top and onboard electronics. So is there something about this particular model that makes it different from the normal triple O Junior?
The name, yes. The guitar itself, probably slightly. Like, not drastic. I'm going to give you a hint, but I'm going to take 5 questions away because
That's fair.
My heart's happy now that you didn't get it. Now I don't have to stretch the whole thing out. So you were at 11. Now you're going to be at 15 questions. This has an artist's name attached to it.
Oh! Is it Shawn Mendes?
Yes.
Of course. Ugh. Well, yeah, I would not have got it without the hint because I wasn't even going there. I knew there was something out there, but I couldn't think what it was. But so what's the full model name?
It's the Triple O Junior 10E Shawn Mendes.
10E. Triple O Junior 10E, but it's the Shawn Mendes one. So I wonder what's different about it other than his name. Any idea?
I think it might be the construction is a little bit better. I forget in which way, but I think there's an improvement in either the back and sides where it's got a real wood fingerboard. It's one of those little things. It's not just his name on it, but...
Well, that almost took a month. So seemed like that almost took a month. So speaking of months, so congratulations. Wow, I stumped you and you stumped me. So
that wasn't cool. I should have let you beat the pulp out of me on 1 week and be able to come back next week.
No, it's totally fair. I regret that I didn't think of that one. To pull on you.
Then I don't feel bad.
Not at all. Okay.
All right.
So speaking of months, you had these strings on for a month. And I didn't like them. You feel like they wore out by that time?
And really, and this is going to sound really like splitting hairs. If I would just strum the whole guitar at the month point, it was still okay. Finger picking, it started to sound a little bit rolled off. Where I really, really got disappointed, and understand when I say this, I'm coming at these strings thinking, $20 a set. I'm used to paying $15 a set retail, which means less than that wholesale. And I already have stockpiled a lot of my favorite strings. If I'm going to commit myself to changing to Kovars, you better give me an extra couple of weeks of enjoying the tone, or I don't see the point. And I don't know if that's really fair. But what I really, really didn't like was the bass E string, and even the A to a point, but if you can picture me playing a song and I'm just strumming across all 6 strings, everything's still okay. When I go down to a bass run, and if I play a G chord and I climb down G, F sharp, E to play an E chord, that little boom, boom, boom sounded like puh, puh, puh. There was nothing left in the clarity department and the definition department that admittingly was so exaggerated to me in the mid-range, the stuff we talked about 2 hours ago at the beginning of the show, that really made me impressed as far as the definition, the clarity, the mid-forward presence that's in this set of strings. It went from being a big plus to being, it almost sounded like I'm playing the whole guitar, all the strings with a bright pick. And then when I do that bass run down on the bass E string after a month, I threw the pick away and I played it with the flesh of my finger pad. It was that drastic, and it just sounded like any liveliness that was in that whole set went away, at least on the bass E. Now, when I say that, what I still have not done yet was compare what my MA540T sound like after a month, and definitely a coated set. So I'm not entirely sure. I'm super happy after a month with my regular set of strings is the caveat there. Don't listen to this podcast without hearing that part too. But I was disappointed at what the bassy wound strings sounded like when I play them by themselves. Apart from that, the mid-range was still fine. I think the overall voice and the overall upper mid-range and treble content wasn't gone after a month. If you would have said to me, just play a D chord after the month's time, I wouldn't even know. It was so unique to the bassiest part of the set. That's what really disappointed me. And then, of course, as soon as I heard that, I kept playing that kind of thing to make sure I was right, and that just made me more unhappy. So it's my disappointment with the clarity of the deepest wound strings after a month, that if I wasn't doing this for the love of playing guitar to see if I liked them again, I would have probably almost heard enough to just say, nah, they're not for me. I'm not giving up on them whatsoever, but that's my first impression after the month's time, and I'm really just being brutally honest.
Well, I have one question for you and one challenge for you. The question is, did you feel like it fell off a cliff?
No, I wouldn't go that far. But
okay,
it went to the edge of the cliff.
Okay, but what I'm saying is, did you just suddenly one day notice that, or was it a gradual decline?
That's an even better question, because if I'm really remembering, I played them at the 2-week mark and then played them a couple of days after that gig, and then I think I didn't play that guitar again until, like, I think 12 or 13 days of not playing passed. So I didn't play it every day from the 2-week mark to the 4-week mark. I think the guitar just stopped impressing me at the 3rd gig. I probably played it the day of the gig at home to warm up, and at the gig, and then I recorded that passage, and these videos will be available soon. I recorded that 4-week mark the day after that third gig. So I guess it was less gradual than I wanted it to be. It wasn't, I wouldn't say it was very gradual at all. I think it was pretty sharp.
That's interesting because having benefited from seeing your video, of course, it's a video going through microphone and a interface and digitally recorded. I was impressed that I thought there was very little difference between 2 weeks and 4 weeks. But you were listening for particular details, and these are things that you noticed in it. So my challenge is, I think you should do exactly that. I would love to do a part 2 of this, maybe a month or 6 weeks from now, where you put on your normal strings and let them do that. Let them go through that period, time period. And you'll be coming from the point of view of you normally play Martin's normal treated strings. I play non-treated strings and see what my feelings are after I've gone through the same time period that you go through. Would you be willing to do that?
Absolutely. Oh, yeah.
Good. Because that's I'm going to now move to my kind of closing impressions about all this. When I put them on the rosewood guitar, I don't think I like them as well on the rosewood guitar as the mahogany guitar. And I said the same thing about the Monels, but I think for different reasons. I like them, and the same thing. At first I didn't like them, and then it was like, well, wait, no, and there's that definition, and there's that great detail, and I really am hearing the colorful aspects of this guitar. And Adirondack with one of the lusher rosewoods like Guatemalan or Cocobolo or Indian it's a very thick, black, inky sound to that undertone. And I think Adirondack helps in some definition ways, but I think also Adirondack has the most bottomless cellar. And so you get a lot of warmth and darkness at the bottom, and mainly maybe it's because it's contrasting to the clarity and not darkness you get in the high end with Adirondack, and the chiminess of it, and same thing. These strings really brought out the detail and definition, really going all the way down to the bottom E string. I think rosewood guitars sound more metallic than mahogany. I think rosewood has its own woodiness, but the string sound is steely to me. And I hear that very clearly between a D18 and a D28 or an HD28 and really across the board. And I think that also gets exhibited more clearly in these strings. And that my Guatemalan Adirondack guitar, the string sound is that steeliness, that metallic-y quality to it, to the report, when you really attack the string, when you're playing leads and you really start playing hard, strumming, when you're the big strum, I hear the steel of steel string more than I did on my mahogany guitar. Granted, this is not scientific. It's one rosewood guitar and one particular mahogany guitar with Sitka and Adirondack and all that. But that's with a pick. I think in both cases, I like these strings best finger-picked and playing fingerstyle. And I think I love the fact that you can play it really softly and you get that definition. So I would immediately recommend these strings for anybody who plays fingerstyle primarily or exclusively and isn't a big heavy-handed beast like I am and who is used to playing vintage guitars and playing where you play relaxed and you let the guitar do the work. Just like when you're playing golf and you're supposed to use the same relaxed stroke for everything, and it's the bigger club that makes the difference from the smaller club. And for people who play guitars that way and play with a relaxed and probably correct technique, I would highly recommend these strings because I love the fact that it allowed me to play softer and softer and still get a lot of tone out in the room and a lot of that detail. And when I play heavier, then I think that phosphor bronzy aspect that my ear hears as a harshness kicks in more. And then when I hear my 80-20s, though I still enjoy them, it's almost as if the strings ask me to lay off, particularly with a pick. And I tried them with nylon picks, and I tried them with the artificial tortoise picks that Dunlap puts out there, whatever their name of their fancy picks are, which I like a lot, that are much more brittle and really give you some really clear definition. And I enjoy them very much, and I'm looking very forward to. I'm going to keep these on as long as I possibly can. I want to really see how long they go. I don't have anything planned, in terms of recording and or any kind of performances that would matter as much to me. So I'm going to I'm going to run them out, and I want to see what that running them out means. Granted, I'm not playing probably as often as you are. I'm hoping to change that coming up. I had squashed my thumb. And so I had to let it heal, and I got the big bruise under the nail and all that stuff. And I thought it was the nail fungus. It's not nail fungus. It's actually from getting the thing pinched in a hinge, like in a door. And so it was really just it had a slow bleed. So I haven't been able to play for a while, and I moved to a thumb pick, which I don't particularly like thumb picks, but just to test these strings, I've been playing with the thumb pick. But I like the strings on the whole. They're different. There's certain aspects of the differentness that I still get that. I think the bottom E strings, I get a little raspy quality from them, and I think that's just my ears hearing the sort of phosphor bronze thing, I think, compared to my 80-20s. But I love the lack of string noise. I like the way they feel. I'm going to focus more on the easiness, as you called it. I really didn't pay that much attention to it. And if anything, on the short scale, it made me worry that I'm going to be bending out of tune and stuff just by playing, not playing with discipline. And which happens with, extra light strings, happens with low tension strings for me, because I'm just not used to them. And so I've enjoyed this experiment. I would say they're totally worth $20 to try them. I would definitely think people should give them a try and see what they think. On the other hand, I'm the kind of person that I like the fact that strings have a life. I never particularly cared for extended life strings because I kind of like the way strings would mellow. And I'm curious to see if I like that about these when they eventually do that. Coated strings don't tend to mellow. Coated strings tend to fall off the cliff. They tend to suddenly just go, and I'm curious to see if these do that or how they behave. Like the fact they're not treated, not coated, that it's all in the alloy. I'm allergic to nickel. I developed a nickel allergy later in life, but I have never had an issue with the retros, and I'm curious to see if I have this. Yeah, I can't wear normal belt buckles anymore and stuff. They give me a itchy rash and stuff like that.
Oh, wow.
So even the snaps on the inside of Levi's, the bolt on the inside of the snap, stuff like that, I have to make sure that it's not in direct contact with my skin now. And
wow.
It's common enough that you can't have nickel in most products in Europe. It's basically banned. You have to have nickel-free stuff. So I'm curious to see if maybe because these are an alloy, maybe the molecular matrix of this stuff would protect people with nickel allergies. Wow. So maybe I'll be curious to know if Martin's allowed to sell these strings or the retros in Europe because of the ban of nickel in products. Maybe that only has to do with clothes and stuff like that. I don't know, but interesting. So for people out there who have nickel allergies, I haven't had any issues with these strings at all at this point. So maybe you just you're not in contact with them enough for it to matter. But or maybe our hands are tough enough that you don't get those kind of reactions. But yeah, what are your ending thoughts about this? Would you recommend the strings, and who would you recommend?
I would definitely recommend. I like the way you phrase it. I would definitely recommend these. $20 to try them. I think if anybody's got a curiosity, don't not try them because I think they sound very, very good. I think if you would appreciate the mid-range bump and the extra clarity and definition, you might fall in love with these. I like the tonal quality of these strings and the slinky feel enough that I'm going to try these again and again. And like I said a few moments ago, please allow me to test my own favorite strings and see what they sound like after a month before I give the big red stop sign to these strings. Going towards this from a value point of view, I did want these to sound better longer for how much they cost. If I find out in my testing that my strings don't sound that great after a month, you have to remember I do like the tonality of these strings as much or a little better than, I like them as much as my phosphor bronze acoustically, and I like them more than phosphor bronze plugged in. So if I go and find out, hypothetically, come back to this program, give you an update that my strings, for example, only last 6 weeks and then they're gone, I would definitely consider trading the life expectancy for the sound I get, and then admit that after 4 or 5 weeks, I've got to change strings instead of waiting an extra 6, because you can make the argument 6 weeks of a fair sound isn't better than 4 weeks of a great sound. And we're bringing this to you, our first impressions. I definitely selfishly want to find out what both of us feel like after we've tried these strings 3 times. Please take that for what it's worth. A program we put together after we've tried these a million times might carry more weight, but I definitely think they're interesting. I don't want to come here and scare anybody away from trying them for the first time, but that's where I stand on it. And Spoon, you made a couple of references at least 3 or 4 times in this broadcast where we'd love to see what other people are thinking. Why don't we ask them? Please, if you're watching this on YouTube especially, let us know in the comment section. Have you tried them? Have you heard them? What are your thoughts? And what are you playing? Let us know what you think of these strings and tell us which guitar you're playing. Even go so far as to let us know which strings you're coming from. We'd love to hear from you. And we're probably the last 2 people that are trying them. So please let us know what you've already found out before we figured it out for ourselves today.
Well, I'll also add too that this is a very limited experience and experiment thus far. I wonder if you did this again, would you have the exact same experience, because they're not coated and they're not treated. The alloy is supposed to be corrosion resistant, but that doesn't mean that it's corrosion proof. And who knows, maybe at your last gig, you were, I've seen the kind of places you play at, the kind of food they serve, maybe some of that very unusual food that you guys have up in your neck of the woods in Pennsylvania was on your hands and maybe got on the strings and did, and maybe that had more to do with that final test. We can't comment on those necessarily of what happens. On some of the critters you folks eat up there, I don't know. But anyway.
But you make a good point. Even though that's a really tasty joke, it's true. I would never go and watch a video and let 2 people tell me what to do after they tried something one time. And I don't know how long it took me to really settle on the strings I've played all my life. So it's way too soon to say. But that's my first impression. And I really, now that I talked to you about it for an hour, I really want to try them again because I remember liking the mid-range so much. Maybe we'll find out that I'm right about everything, but it's worth the trade-off. So if for no other reason, please come back to this show in the future for our future thoughts on the Luxe by Martin Kovar strings, and we'll do all we can to give you an honest opinion, and you got to give us yours back in return. But I think it's definitely a good topic. Again, I thought, are we going to have an hour? Can we come up with an hour's worth of something to talk about? We're going for 2 hours now, so we really got to put a cap on this somewhere.
Yes,
but I'm really glad we chatted. I'm
going to mention too for our friends out there. I'd also be curious to hear any of you who use other brands of strings that have treatments or coatings or longevity by design, and why you like them and why you would recommend them.
Spoon, this has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate you taking your time. Again, if you have any experience with the Kovar strings, please let us know, and we'll be happy to include your opinions in our follow-up episode, if there is one. From all of us at Martins and More, thanks for listening.
Hear you later.